In the past, we've talked several times about these old machines, things to know before you buy them, how to inspect them, but one thing I haven't really gone over, I've touched on it in a few different videos, but I wanted to make one video, is what to do to these bikes right after you buy them. After your inspections, after you've done everything and you negotiate your deal and you pick your dream bike up or you pick your vintage bike up. In the past, I have talked about things you need to do with any motorcycle. Whenever you buy any bike, some of the first things to do. And those all apply to vintage bikes, even more so than a regular motorcycle. To go over the things that I recommend you do with any bike is, first of all, flushing the fuel out. On a newer bike, this might be something that's a little overlooked because, you know, you're probably going to be fine as far as fuel injection, and the age of the fuel probably isn't too old because it's been a motorcycle that's been rode. That's a very nice Viper. Wow. Never really see those around. But with a vintage bike, a lot of the times they tend to sit around, especially if it's a bike that's not super high mileage and it appears that it has been sitting for a while. It's safer to flush the gas out of the bike than to run it through the carburetors. Considering that the bike is running, I would flush the fuel out. I would also check the fuel tank if you haven't done so already. It's very important on vintage bikes or any motorcycle in general to check the condition of the fuel tank. If the fuel tank appears to be fairly clean, you probably are fine with just flushing the fuel out of it. If the fuel tank is looking a little rusty and it looks like there is some rust starting in the tank, perhaps it's not ideal to clean it at this point and to, you know, do vinegar treatments and all these things because it's not that bad. If it is that bad, well, good luck because it is not fun to deal with. But I would recommend, if your tank isn't terrible but it looks like it might have some surface rust starting out, flush the tank out, put some diesel in the tank, put some two-stroke oil mix in the tank, shake it around with a few nuts and bolts, flush it out 3 or 4 times, refill it with gasoline, and pre-mix the tank with a little bit of two-stroke oil. The reason for that is it just helps keep the rust out of the tank, and even with a motorcycle that is carbureted, it's not going to hurt the bike in any single way possible. You're not doing a super heavy mix or anything noticeable really to the bike. It's just going to help keep the tank clean and prevent it from rusting even more and give it like a little surface layer coating. Many times, a lot of these two-stroke motorcycles that are pre-mixed, like dirt bikes and things like that, they tend to have cleaner tanks because the rust hasn't been formed from the gasoline due to the oils that are in the gas. You'll just save yourself from doing the carburetors later. If you are riding at home, try to fill up the gas as soon as possible to get fresh gas in the tank. Now, the next thing I recommend, once again, you do with any bike is change all of the fluids. If it's a shaft bike, change the shaft oil. Change the engine oil. If the motorcycle has a disc brake, change out the brake fluid. Transmission fluid if you have a separate unit for trans oil. This just ensures that the motorcycle is going to continue to run healthy, but not only that, it teaches you about the health of the motorcycle. With the engine oil, you can see any flakes or how old it is and any chunks that are in the oil and immediate issues you might run into. If there's a little gasoline in the oil, perhaps one of the floats is sticking and dumping and hemorrhaging fuel into your engine. Brake fluid, if it's super black, well, it's not going to have the ideal stopping power that you might want. Not only that, but brake fluid, we've gone over this in the past, absorbs water. And when it absorbs water and moisture, it doesn't really want to work as good as you want it to. Now, since the bike is running, you want to make sure it continues to run healthy. In your inspection, if there was any other things like the chain was too loose, the sprockets are worn down, the forks are leaking, this would be the time to go ahead and take care of all the major items before doing heavy mileage. Anything you think that you want to do right away, do it. If there's some things you can do while you continue to ride the bike, that's alright as well, but fluids are an absolute must on any motorcycle. My Hawk here is a 1988. I consider it to be borderline vintage. This bike is water cooled, so you need to change out coolant in motorcycles too, and that's another overlooked service item. You guys think this road is closed or open? Because I feel like if this was a closed road, the sign would be here and not over there. And now in the past I have gone over things to look for before you purchase a bike in your inspection. In your inspection, chances are, very high chance, and I've ran into this in almost every single bike that I have bought, you're going to need tires. You know, you need to make sure your tire life is adequate, and if they're old tires, you want to go ahead and replace them if you're planning to ride the motorcycle. This is yet another thing that's overlooked by a lot of vintage motorcycle owners, including myself to some extent. When a motorcycle has tube tires, which almost all of these older bikes have, the tubes can hold air even though the motorcycle is going to have cracks in the actual tire. Now this isn't necessarily safe to ride on, and you guys should consider changing it out sooner than later. See, this sign is in the middle of the road, kind of. So I'm going to assume that that road's closed. The tires are the only thing connecting you to the road. So if you have a blowout in a vintage bike because you didn't pay attention to it, well, you should just do it. Just change them. If you're planning to ride the bike excessive miles or just on a normal basis, change out the tires, because you're going to need to do it one time or another. And if you're planning to own the bike, just change the tires. It's that simple. I bought several old bikes and I'm trying to get through all of them as soon as I can and justify them slowly changing out the tires on all of them, but I'm never going to do big mileage on a bike without changing them. This Hawk right here, I just put new tires on it, and it's a bike that I do ride a lot. They're super important, and just like the fluids on the bike, it's something you need to consider doing immediately if you need it. Now, I know you guys like these vintage bikes as much as I do, and if you guys are interested in picking yourself up some apparel on vintageracingclub.co, we have just launched a limited edition hoodie, and we're going to continue to do limited edition drops. But not only that, we have house tees live on the website along with a few other items, so if you are interested, take a look there and help support us. Now, when we're talking about older motorcycles, in many cases the value of the bikes do depend on one key factor, and that bigger key factor being originality. If you're concerned, or you want to have that OEM look, or you want to have the value of what a nice original bike would present, and your bike has modifications, I would suggest you start to source the parts you need. Not only that, but a thing that can increase value dramatically is the paint of a motorcycle. Now, a lot of people unfortunately have painted these motorcycles. CB750s are very, very prone to having chopper-like or spray can, rattle can paints on them. My CB750 Super Sport was unfortunately painted a rattle can red color, and originally they only came in blue and orange. I recently just got that bike painted back to its original color. Even though it's not original paint, it has substantially increased the value of the motorcycle. With a paint job that cost me $400, I've substantially increased the pool of people who are going to buy it, if not necessarily the value in general, but the bike's definitely worth more with that fresh OEM style paint. Now, another key thing that's overlooked on these bikes, and not something you have to do right away, but something you need to inspect and keep an eye on, are these older brittle fuel lines. The fuel lines, and I recommend you put a fuel filter on your fuel lines as well. It'll help prevent your carbs from gumming up if you do have just a little bit of stuff floating around. Either way, I think putting a fuel filter on an older bike is a great idea. Now, to talk about the biggest thing that you can do for the bike, I'm saving the best and biggest one for last, because there is nothing that can damage a bike more than not doing this one thing. And that, of course, is not riding the bike. If the bike sits, it's going to develop problems. If you don't ride it, if you don't open it up, if you let the bike sit, more and more and more issues are going to pop up. Now, certain bikes, it's understandable to let them sit as museum pieces or works of art, but even with those bikes, I can guarantee you all the seals in the engine, the brake fluid and the brake lines, the things like timing belts on Ducatis, all these motorcycles are going to be way happier being rode a few hundred miles in a year and properly serviced throughout the years. You change Ducati timing belts on time, you change engine oil on time, you change the brake fluid on time. Even though you're not doing big mileage, if you're still servicing the motorcycle, if you're running the engine, getting the oil hot, getting all the seals and gaskets and everything moving again, it's going to be so much healthier for a motorcycle rather than letting it sit. And that's the biggest thing you could do to maintain a motorcycle, is to simply go out and ride it a few times a year. I'm not telling you to go ride thousands of miles. Even if you do 150 miles on a bike, that is so much better than letting it sit. Even if you just service the bike and get it up to operating temperature without riding it necessarily, even though I recommend you get some air in the cylinders for these air-cooled engines and whatnot, but even just starting it up is so much better for the bikes, the batteries, everything, than just letting them sit. Anyways, that's the final note that I wanted to make for this video. If you guys did enjoy, as always, leave a like, comment what your thoughts are on the video, and subscribe to the channel, and I'll see you guys in the next video.